It was easy to get into the house unnoticed. Jerry only had to go around the back and open the door to the basement. He couldn't go in from the front. The alarm he had installed at the insistence of his wife Shelley would have gone off. For some reason, she was completely obsessed with this and pestered Jerry until he finally installed this system. It would also work for opening a garage door. The delay on the keypad was set to 10 seconds because Shelley asked it to be set that way. 45 seconds is stupid. The robber will have time to slip into my bedroom before the system works, she told him. You just want to give your boyfriend time to get out the window. Jerry joked, but Shelley just laughed at him and then went back to preparing dinner. But it sounded logical, so he reset the delay. Of course, this meant that he himself would set off the alarm every time he returned home, but that would only last for a few seconds until he got out of the car and entered the 4-digit code. So you check it every day to make sure it's working. Shelley smiled brightly one afternoon as he walked into the house, grumbling, after turning her off about 24 times already. The same with any of the windows, they are all under control. But he also knew that no one would notice the wire he ran through the top of the door frame, bypassing the sensor. Shelley almost never went down to the basement, and even if she did, Jerry doubted she would have noticed. When he tested it, the panel lit up perfectly and all the cables were reliable. The door did not make a sound. The hinges, which he had oiled, moved easily. The same goes for the steps, each of which he had carefully nailed almost a week ago. Shelley was even happy about this. She had been begging him for months to fix the rickety steps. Having tested their strength with his 100 kilograms, he smiled to himself. Not a sound came from them. The small .22 caliber high-standard pistol he had tucked into his windbreaker, which hung on hooks at the top of the stairs, held 9 rounds. It felt somehow good to reach into his pocket and find it where he had left it. Jerry had no intention of shooting anyone unless he had to, but he had no intention of retreating either. Something was going on, and he was determined to find out what it was. There was no point in sorting things out with his wife Shelley. If something happened, she would deny everything. And if not, he will look stupid. He was worried about 3 years of trying to impregnate her, and 3 years of failure. He even went to the doctor to get it checked, and was ridiculed when the old doc told him to try not to hug strange women, even fully clothed ones, because he was not only fertile, but way too fertile. The old doc snorted at his own joke, patted Jerry on the shoulder, and told him to go to her with a grin. It was Shelley's turn, but instead she went to her own doctor, the same one she had been using since before their wedding. She insisted on this too. That day, Jerry happened to see her leaving the hairdresser. This happened by accident. Otherwise, he might not have suspected anything. Strange. She was supposed to be at her doctor's appointment, but instead she was getting her hair and nails done. But Jerry was just getting ready for work and was already 5 minutes late, so it didn't dawn on him until he pulled into his garage. It had happened just a month ago. That evening she had told him with a sad expression on her face that it was possible that she could have children, but that it was unlikely. She even cried quietly. He held her until she calmed down, feeling sick in her stomach. "We can just keep trying, honey," she told him, but her tone was not entirely correct, not entirely truthful. That's when Jerry started to keep his eyes open. He actually didn't think the black woman from the hair salon was qualified enough to advise Shelley on such things. Treason? No, it is impossible. Shelley was always home, always. No signs? Not one. When he came home, she was always there. Of course, there were overnight trips, which he had to make 2 or 3 times a month. Maybe drugs. Could it be that she is addicted to something and is hiding it? Also impossible. She looked and acted as healthy as a horse. She even had an extra kilo or 2 on her round body. Gambling? Perhaps she could play in Indian casinos, perhaps. But a quick check of her finances revealed nothing unusual, even if Shelley was frugal. Besides clothes, going to the salon to get your nails done for $50, trips to the salon. But Shelley's nails looked good that day. He never understood this part. He heard, "Damn, I broke my nail," at least 50 times. Later that evening, while Shelley was taking a shower, Jerry rummaged through her drawers, then looked in her closet. Shelley loved beautiful clothes. She had outfits that he had never seen. In the dresser drawer was a small bag of panties, which he wondered why a woman should bother with. He had never seen them before either. But even this was not unusual. When they went out to dinner or dancing, beautiful outfits and tiny panties always appeared. Jerry loved it when Shelley came out and posed, enjoying his delight in how she looked. This woman could definitely turn a lot of people's heads, and it was obvious that she knew it very well. He chuckled to himself, almost wishing it wasn't Saturday night. He felt proud while dancing with her, and then, later, without any doubt, he would be able to peel off her top layers and discover what was underneath this time. And then he found birth control pills. Birth control pills? He blushed and barely managed to pull himself together before she stepped out of the shower. His instinct told him to snap and yell at her, but he had learned to check everything first. Once, many years before, he found Dana, his then-girlfriend, kissing some handsome guy who came to a party. Jerry was ready to ask Dana the main question, and he knew that she was thinking about it too. They even met Mom and Dad. Everything was very serious. Then he saw her greedily kissing some guy on the lips, pressing her whole body against him, which was not at all like a friendly kiss on the cheek. He stood there in shock as he watched her excitedly greet the man. Jerry walked up and grabbed the guy, landing him right on his butt. The man turned out to be her brother, whom Jerry had never met, just came home from college for the weekend. The meeting with her brother was supposed to be the main surprise of the evening. Therefore, although Dana mentioned that she had a brother, she kept silent about the fact that he would appear that evening. After he was thrown out of the house, Dana did not even answer his phone calls. Several times he had barely made it to second base with her, and she had hinted that this day would come. In fact, it wasn't just a hint. When he arrived that evening, Dana kissed him and then slipped the package of protection into his shirt pocket, giving him a sly look. Of course, his blow to his brother right in front of everyone put an end to this. Yes, thinking before you act is a lesson well learned. Jerry had to travel a little. His job was that he ordered fences for farmers, sheds, paddocks. Sometimes he designed a series of pens himself so that farmers could process their cattle, separate them for trips to auction or for medical care, and the like. The job was damn good because he met a lot of really nice people, plus he worked outdoors. His last job was great. Not only did he sell almost 4 miles of fence, but his family invited him to dinner. Ham and black bean cornbread. Real cornbread, not the crap they sell in boxes. Sam Martin was a rough old man, tall and thin. He wore faded red long johns, which was clear because his thick work shirt was always unbuttoned, suspenders holding up his heavy work pants. His wife, Dottie, was plump and happy, with a smile that never seemed to leave her face. By the end of the day, having toured the entire ranch on Honda ATVs, Sam and Jerry had become good friends. Both loved to hunt and fish, and Sam somehow became almost the father figure Jerry never had in his own life. It's hard to understand how this could happen in one day when two men were talking about everything, but it happened. The couple had a daughter. She was about 19 years old and a physically attractive girl. Even in a flannel shirt and blue jeans, it was clear that she was a beautiful young woman. She also acted interested, but, of course, Jerry was married, so she had no hope with him. Her name, they said, was Molly. The next day he thought about her all the way home. Yes, good people, the kind that a man wants to get to know better. Their ranch was hills with good water, and Sam had been raising his herds for many years. Now he needed a good fence, several large sheds on stilts. The outside world was moving closer and closer to his land. New people appeared, and they did not like the fact that cows and sheep roamed freely across their lawns and flower gardens. Therefore, there was no choice: build fences or allow the land to be overgrown with houses. Sam chose to build fences. This turned out to be one of his biggest sales to date. The downside of Jerry's job was that most of the big farms were located a long distance away, so very often he found himself 300 or 400 miles from home. So it was with this place, over 350 miles into Idaho, The company paid for his motels and meals on the road, so instead of driving home, Jerry usually rented a motel room and went home the next day. This time it was different. Sam and Dottie insisted that he stay the night, ushering him to the large bedroom upstairs. It was so quiet there that Jerry had difficulty falling asleep. From time to time he heard sheep or cows, and each time it was like an alarm clock. The night was warm, and he threw off the blanket himself. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, he got up to go to the toilet, and on the way to the corridor, he passed another bedroom. The door was slightly open, a dim nightlight was burning. Molly lay on top of the blanket. She was naked, her lower body was in shadow, one bare breast clearly outlined in the dim light of the night lamp. She seemed to be sleeping, but the scene was extremely erotic. Jerry realized that she was certainly a beautiful young woman, but he also quickly looked away. It was wrong to stealthily look at her like that. On his way to bed, he noticed that the bedroom door was now closed and blushed, realizing that he must have been caught peeping on her. The next morning, Sam and Dottie sat him down at the kitchen table. On the table were piles of eggs, ham, and potatoes that tasted better than anything he had ever eaten. "We grow them right here. We have 16 hectares of land on the northern ridge for potatoes," Sam told him, noticing his satisfied look as he took a second helping. Just then Molly came in, looking around and yawning. She was wearing blue jeans and a flannel shirt, and she looked amazing that way. She then gave Jerry a sly look, raising one eyebrow seductively, causing him to blush. Dottie caught it, looked back and forth between them, and grinned. "More coffee, Jerry?" she asked. Jerry nodded. These were very hospitable people. After breakfast, he gathered his things, put the contract and a beautiful check in his briefcase. It was time to return home to my own life. It occurred to him that he could live like these people and be happy. Dottie handed him a loaf of her cornbread as he climbed into his truck. He took it and thanked her, looking forward to eating on the long journey home. Molly stood on the porch and watched what was happening, holding onto the railing with one hand. Jerry waved at her as he started his truck, and she waved back. All the way home, he thought about her, tried to think about something else, but the vision of her lying there naked kept popping up in his head. Shelley really kept the house clean and was always there to hug and cuddle him when he visited. These trips rarely lasted longer than one night. Jerry loved coming home after a long trip, but for some reason, after overnight trips, she always wanted to pet him more than usual. At 28 years old, Shelley remained in shape. She was full blonde and wore her hair in a short updo. Well-built, she had no lack of upper body. She also worked in real estate commission sales. It wasn't bad either. Some months she made more than him, but that was rare, and in the last few years she would often go a month or two without making any sales at all. However, they managed. Jerry knew he could use a new truck. His old big Dodge Ram still looked good, but was starting to get tired. It could wait because it was paid for. Sex? He came a couple of times a week, and Shelley was always absolutely delighted. He felt that their life together was quite good. Of course, there were a few things he would like to improve, but he did his best. The last trip ended in the same way. Shelley was waiting for him and was ready for love pleasures. A few minutes later, they were in the bedroom. The sheets were fresh and crisp as always when he came home. Jerry handled it well, even though there was that nagging suspicion in the back of his mind. While he was busy with work, his mind was full of numbers and all the plans. He did not even think about his discoveries. That's not what filled his head again. He didn't really have anything solid to base his case on. Perhaps Shelley had 2 appointments that day, both with the doctor and at the hairdresser. New clothes, intimate underwear. Has she really prepared a surprise for him? This actually happened. Several times she would come out dressed to them, taking part in a nice dinner, and would do that little twirl while showing off a new dress, or show him a tiny thong with a grin. But this nagging suspicion did not leave him. He simply had to find out the truth. Birth control pills. This meant that she had lied to him, and the concern was not only because she did not want a child. So he made changes that would allow him to check, to find out. He did it right in front of her, and she didn't even notice. The night all hell broke loose. Jerry drove past his house and looked for an unfamiliar car. She wasn't there, but he didn't expect her to be there because there were neighbors nearby. The light was on in the upstairs bedroom and the curtains were drawn tightly. He had nothing but a sad feeling. Him and the packet of birth control pills he found in her underwear drawer. Talk about a shock to his system. Seeing her leaving the salon when she was supposed to be at the doctor's, this is where it all started. If you smell a rat, it's somewhere nearby. Mom told him about this 500 times. Jerry smelled a rat. At the top of the stairs, he listened. The only sound he heard was the sound of the shower running. It was strange, because it was almost 2 in the morning. He expected her to be asleep, or that he would catch her doing whatever she was doing. If she was doing something, now would be the time because he told her his job was in Idaho. There was no way he could get home until late the next day. There was even a good job in Idaho. He organized a telephone sale. Sam and his wife Dottie were so pleased with the first job that they did not invite him to join them. Actually, he was invited, but he had to participate in the auction for another, much smaller work located nearby. He briefly thought that he might like it, maybe get some more of that cornbread. Besides, maybe we'll be able to see Molly again? Jerry shook his head to clear the thoughts. He wasn't quite himself at the moment. Stupid thoughts kept creeping into his head. Here he was, standing on the top step of the stairs in his own house, thinking about work and about a woman he barely knew. With a gun in your hand? He was very close to simply retreating, sneaking out of the house. But he had to know everything for sure. If Shelley didn't do anything, he could just sneak away and forget about it, but what if he didn't? Jerry didn't know what he would do if there was someone there with her. The thought was swirling in his head that she was having an affair, although there was no evidence of this. There was just some kind of sad feeling. He stood there for a long time, feeling stupid. He listened. The only sound was the running of the shower. Shelley often spent as much as half an hour in the shower, so this was not unusual. Finally, he slowly pushed the door open partially, not really expecting to find anything. A man was sitting on the edge of a fairly rumpled bed with his back to the door. He was fully dressed, reading a magazine. It was actually Jerry's popular science magazine. Jerry's eyes turned red. The shower was still running. The man turned the page of the magazine. "Who the hell are you?" Jerry asked, entering the room. The man jumped as if someone had poked him in the ass and turned around, looking at Jerry in shock. It was Art Barnes, manager of the local bank that Shelley's real estate agency used to close deals. Art Barnes was about 50, with gray hair at the temples, and an imposing figure, a larger man than Jerry. Jerry knew that if there were any worthwhile deals going on in town, Barnes was somewhere nearby. He also knew that, although he was tough and fast, he would most likely lose some of his skin if he took on this asshole. "Hey, it's not what it seems!" Barnes shouted, and then saw the gun in Jerry's hand. His eyes widened in fear. "You came to my house to take possession of my wife in my damn bed?" Jerry growled at him. "Hey, buddy, that's not what—" He didn't get much further. Jerry raised the gun and pointed it at the man. The man threw the magazine and then rushed to attack. This was a complete surprise. Jerry expected the man to chicken out and move away. It is likely that he would have gotten to Jerry before he could shoot, but he was on the other side of the bed and had to come out from behind it. Jerry shot him twice. That's all. The man fell, groaning loudly. "What was it?" he heard Shelley scream, and then the bathroom door swung open. She was completely naked and wet. "Who is this guy? What the hell is he doing here?" Jerry shouted at her. Her hand came up to cover her mouth as she looked at Barnes groaning on the floor. "Honey, it's not what it seems," she said, looking up. "Jesus Christ, are you there washing your ass to keep it clean for this bastard?" Jerry shouted. "No, honey, we were just going to talk, that's all," she whined. "At 2 o'clock in the morning in our bedroom? You're naked." I just needed to take a shower. We didn't—" Her eyes filled with horror. "You are a lying bitch," he shouted. In a fit of rage, Jerry shot her too. Shelley did exactly what she was supposed to do, just like on TV. She fell screaming. Jerry watched her for a moment. The vision seemed unreal. It was like she was a stranger, and it was all in a movie or something. He then walked over and looked at Barnes. He moaned loudly. He looked at Jerry, his eyes full of fear. "Do not kill me! No, please!" he shouted. For a moment he thought about putting one bullet between Barnes's eyes, but decided against it. "Bastard!" Jerry told him, delivering a strong blow to the head. Barnes fell silent. Suddenly he felt stony calm. It was as if all this was happening to someone else. He approached Shelley. She was screaming and crying. "Was it worth it?" he asked her. Shelley didn't answer. She just looked at him with wild eyes. "To hell!" he muttered under his breath, then went to the nightstand and picked up the phone. "I found an intruder in my wife's bedroom and shot him. My wife was injured in a fight. Could you please send an ambulance?" he asked, calm as a boa constrictor. Then he put the pistol in his belt and went downstairs. I checked the refrigerator and found 6 packs of beer there. As always, Shelley did her shopping. On the counter lay an unopened bag of chips and a jar of mixed nuts, which she knew he liked. Jerry took them and walked into the living room, sitting so he could see the bottom of the stairs. He thought about the job he had just won and started running numbers in his head. The pistol poked at him, and he moved it to his side, where it was more comfortable. I could hear Shelley sobbing upstairs, so I reached over to the TV and turned it on. Some people were talking, but he had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. The chips were tasty, good and fresh. He was on his second beer and finishing half a bag of chips when he heard the sirens. They're definitely not in a hurry, he thought. On the way to the police station, he was angry that he was not allowed to take a jar of nuts with him. They weren't very gentle with him either. They noticed him sitting and eating chips, and then saw a gun tucked into his belt. Suddenly, a weapon was pointed at him, and everyone screamed. One policeman reached down and took the gun. Jerry was just stuffing another chip into his mouth when he was grabbed and thrown to the floor, his hands twisted behind his back. "Oh, you're hurting me," he complained, but no one answered. "Shut up." One of them growled at him later when he asked for his can of nuts. Jerry shut up. "It doesn't look good," the lawyer Jerry hired told him. Jerry didn't know this man. He had never needed a lawyer before. One of those who was in prison with him mentioned him. "Mercer, McLaren, Hansen, Ireland, and Phillips," the guy said, listing them. It seemed to Jerry that the guy spent a lot of time talking to lawyers. "I use the services of Jack Ireland. He's a damn good lawyer," the guy boasted. "So why are you still here?" Jerry asked, to which I only received a sideways glance. But he needed to find someone, so he called a lawyer. Jack Ireland was a short and stocky man, and he carried a very battered briefcase. He looked over the charges and shook his head. "So, what is next?" he asked the man. "Bail hearing, we'll get it. There is enough equity in your home to cover it. Then we wait for the grand jury to hear the case." "How serious is it?" "Attempted murder. If you're going to shoot someone, for God's sake, kill them. If you don't kill him, he will testify against you. You're in complete shit right now. I can't believe you used that little gun. You should have gotten a Magnum or something." He snorted slightly at this. "How bad is it with them?" Jerry asked. Nobody told him anything. "Your wife will be fine. Just a hole in her side. Barnes is pretty beat up. Those little .22 cartridges tend to burst, so he spent a lot of time in surgery. Tell me why you shot him a second time." "He was still attacking me." "Well, that shot looks deliberate. You hit him below the belt," Ireland said, looking at him sideways. "Great," Jerry answered categorically, causing another snort from the lawyer. "Magnum would have blown them clean off, but you just made a hole between them." He snorted again. Almost a month passed before bail was set, and Jerry was out in the fresh air again. After being in prison, the air smelled so fresh that it was almost unexpected. He was already accustomed to the smell. He could not go home. The court forbade him to do so. The injunction said 100 meters, but Jerry didn't care. Shelley lived there, having been released from the hospital long before he was released from prison. But he beat Shelley to signing the papers. The place was named Shelley Jacobson or Gerald Jacobson. Any one of them could have signed the papers. one of those little fine points in the letter of the law. This was a pleasant surprise that he didn't even notice when they signed the papers. He was amazed that Shelley was doing this part. Now he knew why. But that little moment apparently slipped her mind because she was in the hospital. Jack Ireland was a good lawyer, and he wanted to make sure he got his money. So if Shelley wants to keep the apartment, she'll have to pay a few bills. Jack Ireland had one very large deposit on his apartment. Jerry was broke. He used his savings account to hire a lawyer, and he knew full well that the fee was just the beginning. He also knew full well that this would anger Shelley, but he didn't care. His truck was parked where he had left it, down the street and around the corner. He believed it was more than 100 meters, just like the restraining order said, but he wasn't sure. The truck had a dozen parking tickets on it, and it was surprising it hadn't been towed yet. Jerry took the tickets and threw them in the trash. What will they do? Arrest him. At the office, Jerry came in to talk to his boss. He seemed very nervous, and then told Jerry that they no longer needed him since he was not available, and they had to hire someone else. Jerry understood everything. He had already seen the articles in the newspapers. That night he curled up in his truck, enjoying the place he had driven into. It was called South Park. It seemed like the joke was on it. The next day he called a lawyer, and somehow Jack Ireland arranged for a policeman to go with him and pick up some of his things. Maybe he wasn't such a bad lawyer after all. Shelley was nowhere to be seen. Jerry grabbed his clothes, then his instruments, and both of his collectible Epiphone guitars. He also took his fishing gear and all 4 coin collections. He thought about getting a new big-screen TV, but there was nowhere to plug it into the forest. On his way out, he noticed the jar of mixed nuts, still sitting on the rack by the chair. He grinned and grabbed it. He looked into the refrigerator and started to grab the last 5 bottles of beer. But the cop gave him a disapproving look, and he left them. Then, on the porch, he changed the access code to the alarm system, to something else right in front of the policeman, who didn't even notice. He chuckled to himself at the petty act. A local store gave him $500 for 2 guitars and all of his fishing rods except one, which he kept for himself. $500 in cash was all he had left in the world. Then, he went to the post office, where he and Shelley rented a mailbox. Of course, his key didn't work. Shelley cut it off from him and changed the key. However, they had his mail. The clerk wasn't supposed to pass the mail over the counter, he learned that from the big notice. But he asked her directly, with a straight face, noticing the fear on her face when she saw him. No problem, she quickly handed him the pack. There were several credit card application forms and one for a funeral home. It seemed appropriate. He also rented another box, then filled out paperwork so the court would have his address. He actually considered just driving away, but driving a monstrous yellow Dodge Ram cab, he figured he'd be easy to find. 2 weeks later, Jerry still couldn't find a job. His unsmiling face had graced the news for days. The newspapers wrote about an overly jealous and insane husband who burst into a simple home business meeting and simply started shooting. He guessed where this version of what happened came from. Art Barnes was an influential local businessman. He decided that his lawyer was right. If he was going to go to all the trouble of shooting someone, for God's sake, he better kill him. Otherwise, this is exactly the kind of shit that will turn out. Everything will turn out right in your face. Returning to South Park, his new home, Jerry drove his truck into the bushes far enough away from the street. He took out a fishing rod, found some grasshoppers, and caught 6 small trout, 15 centimeters long, from a nearby stream. To keep them, they had to be at least 20 in length, but he didn't care. What will they do with him? Write him a fine. He built a small fire and roasted them, and he was just putting the frying pan into the stream when his mobile phone rang. "Jerry, hey guy, I need to talk to you," said his old boss. He suddenly sounded sweet and friendly. "What the hell?" thought Jerry. "Remember that job you got, fencing on Sam Martin's farm in Idaho?" "Certainly." "So, he has more than 4,000 hectares, and he wants the larger area to be fenced with a transverse fence. 2 barns and a fence right up to the city limits. This will be the biggest job we've ever done, he said, excitement clear in his voice. What does this have to do with me? Jerry asked. He was still slightly furious at how he had been treated, but lately everyone had treated him in such a way that he spent almost all his time in the park alone. Martin insists on you, says that if not you, then he will hire someone else. Well, that's nice of him, but... Jerry knew he shouldn't have left the state. What do you say? His boss asked him. Jerry didn't know what to answer. Then it dawned on him. Maybe. What do you suggest? Will you go back to your job? No. Well then, how about double commissions? Double? Yes, and return to full-time work? Well, that is, you don't have a weapon, do you? No, I'm not allowed to have it. The police took mine. This made Jerry angry. Hell, he didn't run around and shoot everyone, he only shot 2 people. He wasn't a psycho, just firing in all directions if something irritated him. But in the newspapers, everything looked exactly like this. What about my salary? It was unfair when I was fired. I couldn't even explain anything. Damn, this is for several months? Then half? Plus my benefits? Jerry knew perfectly well that he was the company's best salesman. The man hesitated. Jerry could almost hear the wheels turning. He also understood perfectly well that the profit would be only 83 cents per half meter, but 4,000 hectares? Literally, miles of hedges, sheds on poles, one of which is 30 by 18 meters? Crap. Okay, agreed, said his boss. Jerry went down to the little corner store and bought himself a jar of mixed nuts to celebrate. He also bought a bottle of beer. Beer was prohibited, but he didn't care. However, he drank quickly and buried the bottle. The sour-faced old judge looked suspiciously at Jerry and his lawyer, but he approved the request to cross state lines as part of his work, and he also had to return every evening. You're facing some damn serious charges, Mr. Jacobson. Damn serious. But I cannot deprive a person of the right to do his job until the case is resolved. So don't screw this up or I'll throw you back in jail, okay? Yes, Your Honor. Jerry managed to keep a serious face. The next day, he was on his way to Idaho. Old Martin greeted him with a smile and a handshake. Obviously, the news had not yet reached him, and Jerry saw no reason to bring up the topic. We plant corn in that little spot by the creek. There's good soil on the south side. We need to keep the sheep away from him. Then the Angus, we kept them free range, but there's a lot of construction going on, and I'm just tired of hearing the screaming, so we want to keep them on our land, okay? It seemed to Jerry that this decrepit old man must have a hell of a lot of money. By the time they got back to the ranch house, it was almost 8 in the evening, and Jerry knew he had to leave to get back to Oregon before midnight. He hated the thought of giving up dinner and the chance to see Molly again. But he had to leave, and he left. Back in Oregon, he called but only had an automated voice answer, then called again as soon as the bail office opened. Hey, you don't have to call every damn day. Just follow the rules, okay? The person who answered told him. Okay, he replied. No one ever checks anything unless something happens that catches their attention, he realized. He got back into his truck and drove back to the Martin farm, driving at top speed. As soon as he arrived, he noticed Molly sitting on the porch. She jumped up and ran inside. A few seconds later, she returned with a large hat and a basket. She was wearing cut-off blue jeans and a t-shirt, and her bouncing breasts showed that she hadn't bothered to wear a bra. Go, she told him as she climbed into the truck. Where? Dad told me to show you the area near the building site so that you can take measurements. Today, everyone is busy cutting hair. A haircut? He asked. Yes, sheep. Everyone will be busy until dark. It took over an hour to get to the area they were talking about. Cattle wandered around, not paying attention to them. On the way, they talked about everything in the world. He glanced at her every now and then, loving the way her soft breasts bounced every time they went over a bump. They drove through open fields. There was not even a hint of a road, only the occasional streak of what looked like ATV tracks. The thought crossed his mind that it had been a hell of a long time since he had been with a woman, but he pushed it out of his mind. Work was more important, and he didn't want to do anything that would upset her parents. Jerry came to a large rise in the trail. There was a fairly large river, and about a half-mile away there was a row of 3-story apartment buildings. They continued down, and they were out of sight. It looked very strange, completely out of place in this seemingly wilderness. Then, on the other side, he noticed a highway, cars rushing past at high speed. Progress, that's what it's called, he thought. Jerry realized the problem. Grazing laws be damned. Livestock in someone else's backyard is a nuisance. The fence goes 15 meters from these buildings, right up to the city limits. We are lucky because we own the riverbank on both sides. To cross the creek, Jerry switched to 4-wheel drive, then drove along the fence line, using his speedometer to gauge the distance. Then, returning to the big house, he sat down and counted. This work will take their entire team weeks. Finally finished, he looked at Molly. She sat cross-legged on a chair, her top leg swinging back and forth, her shoe dangling from her toes. Everyone is downstairs in the lower barn. Now they won't come in for several hours. Would you like to go upstairs? She grinned. Jerry blushed at her impudence, but knew he couldn't. I cannot. Well, I mean, I'm still married, we live separately, and besides, I barely know you. Oh, then I'm sorry, I didn't understand you don't have a ring on. Are you getting divorced? Yes, most likely. In fact, I'm sure of it. It's clear. So you didn't get along? And what was the problem? I shot her, he admitted. You, what? Molly's eyebrows rose. I shot her and her lover. They were at my house, in my bedroom. It's clear, I guess I don't blame you. Did you kill them? No, Jerry answered. Well, fine then, I think. Lots of problems, though. Yes. Jerry told her the whole story. Molly sat quietly and listened. So that's why you had to leave last night? To return to Oregon? Do you have to do this every night? Yes, until the trial. Then I'll probably end up in prison. Maybe not, we'll see. And what? Can I go with you? With me? Yes, to Oregon. I'm not afraid of you, you're good. Maybe even the only one, I don't know yet. I know that I'm tired of living here in the middle of nowhere. Don't get me wrong, I love it here, it's my home. But the only men around are either old or married, so sometimes I get lonely. What about your parents? Would they be upset if you just... Jerry asked. Dad said I should try to lasso you, said you looked like a good investment. He had never said anything like this to me before. He met this boy I was dating and said he wasn't worth the effort. I don't think you mentioned that you have an old lady, otherwise Dad would never have thought about it. He's a little old-fashioned. She chuckled as she said this. This is somehow unexpected, Jerry managed to squeeze out. Jerry, I'm not a virgin. I know men. Well, one man, a boy, actually. We both grew up here, so we already knew about all this, so we tried it. But still, I'm not a prude, and I think I would like to be with you. And if you and I decide that we want to be together, I will never cheat on you, okay? You can be absolutely sure of this. I already know what you can do in this case. She giggled. Jerry didn't have to think about it long. What will we tell you? He began. Come on. What is there? Molly stood up and, taking him by the hand, led him to the lower barn. A dozen men were working with the sheep. Mr. Martin saw them coming, saw them holding hands, and grinned. Jerry and I are leaving. We'll be back in the morning, okay? Okay, sweetie. Have some fun. He grinned again and went back to work. Jerry blinked and Molly just smiled. Dad and Mom are farmers. They know everything about sex. Everyone and everything is engaged in it. It's natural. She laughed. Jerry didn't know what to answer. He had never met such a woman in his life. She clearly wanted to be with him, and there was nothing wrong with her just saying so. On the way to the motel, Jerry somehow managed to stay within the speed limit, with the exception of one section. It wasn't easy to do that with Molly sitting bare-chested next to him. They had barely reached the open highway when she pulled her t-shirt over her head. His first observation was correct. She was gorgeous. He even started to slow down, but Molly stopped him. "The first time should be in bed. By the time we get there, you'll be ready." She grinned, reached out, and ran her hand down his trousers. One day he asked her to put on a t-shirt because, even while turbocharging his big diesel V8, he just couldn't keep his hands off one trucker who spotted her. Hell, 95 mph in a big semi can get you killed. "This guy can see you," Jerry told her as the huge truck stopped to the right, and the driver craned his neck to look out the window. He just passed him at about 70. "Yes, I know." She giggled, continuing to lick her lips. "I can make his day," she said, sitting up and throwing her shoulders back. She then looked at the man and stuck out her tongue. "God," Jerry muttered under his breath. Finally, after several miles of pursuit, he told her to cover herself before someone got run over, which Molly mercifully did. 5 miles later, he fell behind again. She put on a t-shirt to go into the room, but as soon as the door closed, she immediately took it off. Jerry was used to making love with his wife Shelley. She was always ready, if not impatient. Here it was a completely different matter. Molly didn't just want, she wanted him, climbing on top of him and taking him inside her before he even had time to take off his pants. Her body was much slimmer at the waist and hips, her breasts high and firm with youth. They spent most of the night just exploring each other. "What did he say?" Jerry asked Molly around 11 o'clock the next morning. She called her father to explain that they were taking the day off and would not be returning. "Just laughed," she said, climbing back onto what served as a bed. By evening, Jerry was in love with this woman. He knew almost nothing about her, but he didn't care. He wanted her. Over dinner at a tiny local cafe, he told her exactly that. "Do you mean only us, the regulars?" "Yes, I want you to belong to me," he said, being serious. "Wow, I actually expected you to just want to have fun. Dad said he thinks you're a good breeder. That's how life is for him." Jerry blinked at this. Molly laughed. "Well, you are wonderful. But where will we live?" she asked. I don't know." At this point, Jerry actually had no idea. "Well, you have a job and a truck. We can start right there. Let's see what happens. If I ever decide to devote myself to you, it will be forever." She smiled. "Molly, I'm falling in love with you," he said. "Don't do this. Not now." "I like being with you, but I'm not entirely sure," she said, her expression serious. "Fine." His own expression gave him away. "Relax, Jerry. For now, no one will touch me except you, and if I decide that this is not for me, then you will never touch me again. Okay?" "Fine." "Okay, we understand each other. Now let's go back to the motel." She grinned. By the next day, Jerry had finished with the proposals and contracts and sat down with Sam Martin and his wife Dottie. They made a few tiny changes. The man signed the papers and shook his hand. A few minutes later, Molly came out with 2 suitcases. The couple looked at her in surprise, then at Jerry. "I'm going with Jerry," she said. For the first time, Jerry saw the smile leave Dottie's face, but she quickly hid it. Sam stood up, walked over and hugged her. Then he turned to Jerry. "You have a lot going on. You need to deal with it all." He said this in a much more serious tone than Jerry had seen so far. At this point, it became obvious that he knew much more than he was saying. Jerry nodded. "Molly isn't going anywhere," he said. "Dad!" Molly exclaimed. "Shut up, honey. I like Jerry. I think he's a good person, but he needs to sort his shit out. He still has a wife, and there's no way in hell you two could start a life together." Jerry knew the man was right. He saw Molly's shoulders slump. She was so young and impulsive, but there was no way she could resist this powerful man. After dinner, he shook hands with everyone and hugged Molly for a long time. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he told her. "It's okay, Jerry. I'll wait for you. I still need to know." Tears welled up in her eyes as he climbed into his truck. The long journey back seemed to last forever. Jerry didn't want to go back. Now he knew the only place on earth where he would like to be. The trials were not in a hurry, and there were times when Jerry almost forgot about what he had to face. Work did not distract him from his affairs. On weekends, he made long trips to see Molly. Sam and Dottie greeted him, not caring that they were retiring to her bedroom for the evening. After a few weeks, he felt almost accepted. He even gained a little weight, and it was hard to avoid it, looking at how Dottie cooked. Every lunch consisted of mountains of food, all of it wonderful. He discovered that Molly could cook as well as her mother, and she was a good student. Also, she was good on the ranch. He once watched as a large calf, somehow injured, exploded as it was being led into the pen. He managed to grab it by the tail, but this resulted in him being dragged around the field for several minutes while she laughed hysterically at his antics. But he still managed to slow down the movement of the large animal. Molly ducked under the tail and reached out to catch the opposite front leg. Using her weight, she pushed the animal with her shoulder, and it fell. Molly on top. A piece of rope appeared in her hand, and she tied her hind legs in an instant. The animal gave up and lay there whining. Then, of course, his mother came running, completely ready to kill. Jerry would have started running as fast as he could, but Molly stood still, so he had to stay. Molly tossed him a flimsy stick, and Jerry wondered for a moment what the hell he was supposed to do with it. The cow lowered her head and sniffled, throwing dirt into the air with her front hooves. Molly just poked her in the face with her stick, and she stopped, not knowing what to do about it. Jerry did the same when the cow gave up and turned to him. Together, they drove the cow away and closed the gate, then returned to the big calf. She skillfully stitched up a cut on her shoulder blade. It caught a piece of wire or something like that. She put in a few stitches, added some ointment from the back of her ATV, then released the calf. He stood up and just stood there with his head down, his mouth dripping. After opening the gate, the cow ran up to the calf and almost immediately began to feed it. "Well, everything will be fine," she grinned. "The cow wanted to kill me," said Jerry. "Yes, but she was just trying to protect her child, that's all. Cows are easy to deal with. They're actually stupid. It's the damn sheep that give us trouble," she grinned. Jerry had already seen the lead you study the hole in the fence, a little more than usual, and then begin to widen it until it was large enough to crawl through. The next moment, the whole herd was on the other side of the fence. When he helped herd the herd into the pen, there was a passage in the barn through which the animals had to enter one at a time for shearing. As soon as everyone was in the pen, Jerry threw on the gate latch. He took about a dozen steps. One large sheep came up, looked at the lock, pulled up its nose, and threw it back. The gate swung wide open as she hit it with her head, and the whole herd came back out into the open field. This caused some commotion. 2 small border collies ran out, surrounded the herd, and froze, staring at them. The herd froze and stared back until one of them looked away, at which point the entire herd turned and walked back into the pen. Molly walked over and opened the latch on the gate, then reached down and pulled the chain bolt up and up, setting the bolt. "They know everything about the gate," she laughed. Jerry then looked at the 2 dogs and could have sworn they had a disapproving expression on their faces as they both looked straight at him. This continued for several more weeks. He walked a long way to the Hughes ranch and then began helping with the housework. Sam and Dottie were watching him closely, and he knew it. But it was fun. For a while, he almost forgot about his real world, immersed in a way of life he had never known. Reality always returned when he unlocked the door to his tiny apartment in the city. One day the phone rang. Jerry was surprised to hear Shelley's voice because there had been no contact before. "How are you, Jerry?" she asked. He thought she wanted to talk about their upcoming divorce. There was really nothing to talk about. She had already been evicted from the house, which was up for sale. Jerry knew that the house was unlikely to sell quickly, and even if it did, there would be no money to fight for. "I'm fine. What do you need?" he asked. "I just wanted to thank you for not fighting with me about paying for my support," she said. Jerry just chuckled at this. The court ordered him to pay her a substantial amount. The lawyer said it was a pity that he returned to work. Otherwise, the amount could have been much less. Her work at the agency was put on hold while she recovered from her injury. Jerry saw the medical report and knew that Shelley was playing on this as best he could. However, there was nothing to quarrel about. The position he was in meant he had paid. Period. I also wanted you to know that I forgive you, she added. What? I forgive you. I understand that you were angry and did not want to offend me. You've got to be kidding me, he said. No, I'm not joking, I'm serious. I still love you, always have. I was thinking maybe, if you wanted, we could go somewhere, have dinner and talk? Jerry recognized the intonation in her voice. It was familiar to him. That's not a good idea, Jerry finally said after a long pause. Of course it's good. Everything can be the same as before, a nice evening, and then we can have a little fun, like before. I'll even wear one of those outfits you like so much. Maybe without underwear you'd like it. I miss you. The tone of her voice became seductive, although the words were calculated to piss him off. This worked too. Shelley, you were the one who cheated on me. There is no way in the world I will go on a date with you. Oh, don't be like that. I'm trying to make peace with you. I told you I forgive you for this. I know you didn't want this, she said. In terms of, in what sense? I didn't want a damn thing. It would be better if I killed you, bitch, you and that bastard Barnes. Do you forgive me? Jerry suddenly got angry and shouted into the phone. Art can get to places in me that you can't even get close to, honey. Now there was an unpleasant note in her voice. Then there was dead silence on the line, which made Jerry even more angry. I can just go there and finish this damn job, he shouted. There was a quiet murmur in the background, and the phone went silent. So what the hell was that? He thought, still angry. There were 3 of them, all large. He was handcuffed, and Jerry found himself locked in a prison cell again. It was pretty stupid. Why did you threaten her? His lawyer asked as soon as he entered. I didn't threaten, that is, not really. She made me angry. For God's sake, she called me and told me she forgave me. This bitch cheated on me, she must be crazy. Well, they have a tape of you threatening her and Barnes. This is a violation of the restraining order, he said. She called me, he protested. They say something else. They? You mean the son of a bitch was there too? Apparently. Jerry sighed. Only then did he realize that that was exactly what they had done. The lawyer then played a short recording. It was just his voice, shouting, right after Shelley's pleasant voice invited him to dinner. The recording has been changed, he told the lawyer, and a feeling of fading came over him. Maybe, but all this is not good at all, the lawyer said. The old judge looked at Jerry with a sour face. Then he shook his head. Only part of the entire recording was played for the court. Shelley's voice sounded pleasant. She really sounded as if she was trying to solve something, to make peace. Jerry heard his own voice screaming in rage. He knew he sounded completely insane. This man is too dangerous to be left free, the prosecutor said. It should be obvious to the court that this is a deliberate attempt to frame my client. It was he who suffered terribly. His wife cheated on him with Mr. Barnes. This is obvious evidence. This is nothing more than an attempt to take revenge, Jerry's lawyer tried to prove. But it was your client who made the threat, the judge said simply. Yes, and there is no evidence of an affair either. Jerry found himself back in a prison cell. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into a month. His lawyer stopped by several times to give updates. One day, a young woman came to him. She introduced herself as Carrie Anderson, also an attorney. I don't think I can afford another one. Jerry stopped there. He has already accepted that he will go to prison. Everything is settled. It looks like you have friends. I'm taking this matter upon myself. We have a whole team to help. She smiled at him. Friends? Jerry asked. Yes, Sam Martin and his wife. She smiled. There is still a message there. They said that you will understand. What's there? Jerry was confused. A good breeding bull? She had a puzzled expression on her face. Jerry chuckled at this. Everything suddenly began to develop very quickly. The powerful Mr. Art Barnes could control the situation in the small town, but could not control the outside forces. In no time at all, they had absolute proof that the tape had been edited. After tracking Jerry's cell phone to where the call was coming from, it turned out that the call was from Art Barnes's work phone. Just 3 days later, Jerry was back out on bail. The first thing Jerry did was pick up his truck and head to Idaho. Molly nearly knocked him over when she ran up and hugged him. Sam and Dottie stood on the porch, beaming. "I want to thank you guys, but why did you do this for me?" he asked. "Not for you, but for Molly." Sam grinned at him. That evening, Jerry sat down and calmly told them everything, for the very first time. Until this moment, he had not done this, although he told Molly. But he also learned that they already knew most of what happened, and again Jerry felt almost calm. That evening, he lay in bed with Molly, clinging to her as tightly as he could. Something had changed, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. "I'm ready," she told him in a whisper. Jerry smiled happily. She accepted him. Molly became his, forever. Finally, after just 1 short month, the day of the trial came. The judge was different, but still an old man with a sour face. Things went about as Jerry expected. Both Barnes and Shelley testified that they were having a routine business meeting, and because it had been a long day, Shelley paused to freshen up in her private bathroom. They then stated that Jerry burst in and just started shooting. Of course, Jerry's team countered that it was 2 o'clock in the morning in the bedroom of her house. The prosecution presented a large diagram explaining their version of what happened. It showed Barnes sitting on the bed reading when Jerry broke into the house. His team responded by asking how Jerry could rush in and start shooting. Barnes should have stood up and moved forward. Since Jerry was in his own bedroom and was attacked by a very large Mr. Barnes, it was self-defense. He couldn't have known that Barnes was there by invitation. He could have been a robber or even a rapist. Jerry defended his own home. The jury members glanced at each other. Shelley was again called to testify. She again protested her innocence that they had an affair. Photos emerged showing her and Art Barnes in compromising situations. Jerry knew about these photographs. They were taken after they were both discharged from the hospital. It occurred to him that Barnes had been shot in the crotch, but from the photographs it was clear that everything was healing well there. Shelley faltered and lost her composure when she saw the photographs. This was the work of a very good private detective agency. For some people, they were unexpected. They were shown on a very large screen. It was clear to Jerry that Shelley was lying. Art Barnes was probably not bigger than him. The prosecution tried to protest against the explicit nature of the photographs, but it was too late. Everyone had seen them. There was a gasp in the courtroom as people turned to look at what was happening. Art Barnes's wife jumped to her feet. "You are a son of a bitch!" she screamed and ran out, leaving him sitting there. He looked completely miserable. Jerry looked at Carrie Anderson. She didn't change her expression. "Rejected," said the stern judge to the continuing protests of the prosecution. The following photos showed the scene taken by police. The pictures clearly showed the rumpled bed, the magazine lying on the opposite side of the bed, and the fact that Shelley was lying naked after he shot her. No one bothered to cover anything up. Jerry looked at Shelley, sitting to the side, her head down, her face flushed. Later, as they talked in the hallway during a break, Carrie explained that the case would be closed except for one small problem. "Which?" he asked. "You shot your wife?" The Barnes shooting was bullshit and was justified. Shooting your wife is too much. We can go into passion, an outburst of rage maybe. Try it in the finale, maybe get sympathy from a few jurors. It's too late now to seek temporary insanity. This judge will never do that. "How about I just tell the truth?" said Jerry. "We can try. What would you say?" "That bitch drove me crazy," he said. "For this, you will be charged with assault with a deadly threat, understand?" "Yes, I understand. But this is true." Carrie sighed, then nodded. "On the charge of attempted murder, what is your verdict?" asked the judge. The jury foreman stood with papers in his hands. "Not guilty." "On charges of first assault?" "Guilty." The man sat down. There was dead silence throughout the entire courtroom. Jerry had already noticed that Art Barnes was nowhere to be seen, and Shelley was nowhere to be seen. The old judge was shuffling some papers in front of him. "What a mess," he said finally. Jerry was told to stand up. "Son, you don't have the right to just walk around and shoot people, no matter how angry you are," the judge said, then shook his head. Carrie explained to him that this judge tended to talk a lot when handing down a sentence, so he stood silently and waited. "At least you didn't kill anyone, and that's good. I guess," he added, looking around the courtroom. This caused laughter in the hall. "Quiet!" The judge slammed his gavel, then grinned, but quickly hid his grin. Sex, lies, treason, violence, dirty little plans for revenge. My God, the lengths some people go to. Then he looked down at Jerry. 5 years? He said. Jerry's heart sank. Conditionally, with a probationary period. The time served is counted. Now get out of here. The judge stood up and left without looking back. Jerry stood up and hugged Carrie. Then he turned to look at Molly sitting in the hall. She smiled and cried at the same time. The sun was shining as Jerry walked out of the courtroom holding Molly's hand. When his final divorce hearing took place a few days later, there was almost no arguing. Her lawyer was there, but she herself was absent. The requirement for alimony was dropped because calculations showed that Shelley now earned more than Jerry. It's hard to make a lot of money while in a prison cell. When he left the office, the sun was also shining. The big diesel Dodge purred as they drove along the nearly empty highway toward Idaho. Molly leaned back in her seat, her blouse off, and her breasts exposed to the morning sun. "We're getting close to the truck," Jerry warned her. "I don't care. Let him have fun. You don't mind, do you? The sun is so nice." Jerry just laughed, turned on his turn signal, and drove around the big truck. They were climbing a long slope so that the driver could only glance briefly, if at all. "Tell me, what do you think about our wedding, dear?" she asked as soon as he pulled into the right lane again. "I don't mind, but do you want to?" "Of course I want to. Besides, you should—" "I must? Why?" "We didn't use protection," she grinned. "We have never used it. What does this mean? Do you remember in the house that night I told you I was ready?" "Oh, that's what you meant. I thought you meant that you were ready to be with me." "I was ready. And what?" "And what?" he teased her. "My dad has a gun." She burst out laughing. "He won't need it," Jerry grinned. The sun was still shining when they arrived at the large ranch house. "I want to go down to the stream," Molly said. "For what?" Jerry asked. "So that I can properly welcome you home," she grinned. As they were getting out of the truck, Sam and Dottie came out of the house. Molly waved to them and then took Jerry's arm. He looked back as she pulled him down the hill towards the creek. Sam and Dottie laughed as they walked back into the house, also holding hands. On the soft, grassy bank, she stripped naked. Naked, facing each other, he somehow knew what to do. He reached out and took both her hands in his. They looked into each other's eyes for a very long time. Then she slid into his arms. Their connection took place at a slow pace, surrounded by bird song and the quiet sounds of a small stream. As they lay in each other's arms, enjoying the delightful surroundings, a powerful roar of a bull was heard in the distance. Jerry threw his head back, trying his best to imitate the sound. Molly became hysterical. "You need to work on this," she giggled, wiping away tears. "What about another place?" He smiled. "You feel great, dear." Laughing, they got dressed and walked back to the house. Jerry knew that for the first time in his life, he was truly home. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.